At 3:17 in the morning, you wake up because someone is standing outside your motel room. You don't hear a knock, you hear a car door close. Then another. You sit up in bed and stare at the ceiling. For the last 4 months, you've trained yourself not to react to sounds like this. Every unfamiliar engine, every pair of footsteps in a hallway, every police cruiser that happens to stop at a red light behind you. You tell yourself it's nothing. Just another night. Just another motel. Just another place where nobody knows your name. Then you look through the curtain. 2 vehicles are sitting across the parking lot. The lights are off. Nobody is getting out. And suddenly you realize something you haven't allowed yourself to think about for weeks. Maybe they finally found you. But how? You changed cities. You changed phones. You stopped using your old address. You paid cash whenever you could. You told almost nobody where you went. You thought disappearing meant becoming invisible. But that isn't how a fugitive investigation works. The people looking for you don't necessarily have to know where you are. They only have to eliminate everywhere you aren't. And that process can turn an ordinary person into a narrowing circle of possibilities. So let's go back to the beginning. 4 months earlier, you were not a fugitive. You were just someone who made one decision you thought would disappear. Level 1. The day you don't show up. It starts with a courtroom. Your name is on the schedule. Your case isn't finished. You've been ordered to appear. And you know you should be there. But that morning, you're sitting in your car outside the courthouse. The engine is running. You can see people walking through the doors. You can see security checking bags. You can see lawyers rushing inside with folders under their arms. You look at the clock. Your hearing is getting closer. Your hands are sweating. You tell yourself you'll go inside in 5 minutes. Then 5 minutes becomes 10. 10 becomes 20. And eventually, you drive away. Nothing dramatic happens. No police chase. Nobody runs after your car. You simply leave. And that's what makes the decision dangerous, because the consequences don't always arrive immediately. Somewhere inside that courthouse, your absence is recorded. A judge can issue a bench warrant. The case continues without you. And your name becomes attached to a piece of information that can follow you far beyond that courtroom. You drive to work that afternoon. You buy gas. You order food. You go home. Everything feels normal, but your life has quietly changed. Before that morning, a police officer checking your name would see your ordinary information. After the warrant, that same check can produce a very different result. And you don't know it yet, but eventually, somebody is going to check. Level 2. The warning. At first, you think you've gotten away with it. Days pass. Nobody comes to your door. Weeks pass. You don't see police outside your workplace. Your phone still works. Your bank account still works. You go to the grocery store. You drive to work. Nothing happens. So your brain makes a dangerous calculation. Maybe nobody cares enough to look. But a warrant doesn't need someone standing outside your house 24 hours a day. It can simply sit inside law enforcement databases waiting for the next interaction. A traffic stop, a license check, an encounter with an officer, a name search. One ordinary moment can suddenly become very unordinary. Imagine you're driving home one night and a patrol car pulls you over because one of your headlights isn't working. The officer asks for your driver's license. You hand it over. He walks back to his vehicle. You watch him through the mirror. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Then he comes back. And his attitude is different. Because when your name was entered into the system, something appeared. The warrant. Suddenly, the problem you thought was sitting quietly at a courthouse is sitting inside a police computer several miles away. That's when you make the second decision. You leave. You pack a bag. You don't tell your family exactly where you're going. You drive through the night and cross into another state. You think the state line is a wall. It isn't. Level 3. You cross the line. Crossing a state border doesn't magically make the original case disappear. In fact, deliberately traveling between states to avoid prosecution can potentially create additional federal consequences depending on the circumstances. And this is where the U.S. Marshals can become relevant. The Marshals Service has a long-standing role in apprehending fugitives, often working through task forces alongside state and local agencies. You may have left one county behind, but now the problem can involve multiple jurisdictions. You arrive in a new city. You rent a cheap room. You get a temporary job. You tell yourself you started over. But you haven't started over. You've only moved the problem. Your old identity is still connected to your records. Your previous address still exists. Your former employer still remembers you. Your relatives still have your number. Your vehicle may still be associated with you. Your old phone number may still appear in records. And all those disconnected pieces can become useful when investigators start putting them together. Level 4. Someone opens your file. Somewhere you will never see, an investigator sits at a desk and opens your case. There is no dramatic music, no wall covered in red string, no giant map with your face in the middle. Usually, the beginning is much more ordinary. A photograph, a name, date of birth, last known address, known vehicles, previous employment, family connections, previous locations. The investigator isn't necessarily asking, where is this person right now? The better question is, what can we establish about this person's movements? That's a completely different problem. Your old apartment becomes relevant. Your former employer becomes relevant. A relative becomes relevant. A friend becomes relevant. A vehicle becomes relevant. One piece may mean almost nothing by itself, but investigators can compare pieces. Suppose your old roommate says you left 3 weeks ago. Then an old employer says you stopped working around the same time. Then a vehicle connected to you is seen in another city. None of those facts proves exactly where you are, but they narrow the possibilities. And that's the part people misunderstand about disappearing. You imagine the government needs one perfect clue. Often, investigations work through accumulation. One fact removes one possibility. Another removes another. Eventually, the giant map of possible locations becomes smaller and smaller. Level 5. Your life leaves a trail. You decide you're going to become invisible. You stop posting online. You avoid your old friends. You use a different phone. You stay in cheap hotels. You pay cash whenever possible. For a while, it feels brilliant. Nobody knows where you are. But here's the problem. Disappearing from social life is not the same as disappearing from every record. You still need food. You still need transportation. You still need somewhere to sleep. You still need communication. You still need to interact with other people. And every ordinary decision creates possibilities. An investigator doesn't necessarily need to watch you every second. They can work backward. Where were you last known to be? Who knew you? What vehicle were you associated with? What places connect your old life to your new one? Which person has reason to know where you went? Imagine investigators discover that someone connected to your old life has recently communicated with a person in the city where you might be hiding. That's not proof, but it's a lead. And a lead doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be good enough to investigate. This is where your confidence starts collapsing. Because every ordinary person in your life becomes a potential connection. Level 6. The friend who knows too much. There is always one person you didn't completely cut off. Maybe it's an old friend. Maybe a former coworker. You tell yourself that this person would never betray you.